Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Brandon Moore had always believed he knew his wife. 28 years of marriage should mean something, build a foundation solid enough to weather life's storms. He was 52, with gray hair at his temples, a senior logistics manager in Charlotte, North Carolina. Melissa, 49, worked as a corporate events coordinator, always sociable, outgoing, full of energy. Their 2 daughters had already moved out. Rachel worked as a designer in Boston. Sophie was in grad school in Atlanta. All that remained were the 2 of them, navigating the calm waters of a mature marriage. Or at least that's what Brandon thought, until 3 months ago. Melissa always had work dinners, always had demanding clients, always had events that ran late. Brandon never questioned her because he trusted her. But lately, late meant almost midnight. Sometimes past midnight. And when he called, worried, her answers came laced with irritation, as if caring about her was some kind of crime. On Thursday night, the last straw broke. Brandon was in the living room when he glanced at the clock and saw 11:40 p.m. Melissa had left at 7 for a client dinner. He picked up the phone and called. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice muffled by music and background chatter. "Hey, I just wanted to check if everything's okay, if you'll be much longer," Brandon said, trying to sound casual. Her reply hit like a slap. "Don't call me, I'm not your property." Her voice was cold, sharp, filled with a contempt he'd never heard before. She hung up before he could respond. Brandon sat in the living room, phone in hand, the silence of the house echoing like an empty chamber. Those words weren't just rudeness. They were disdain. Distance. And something far worse, something he didn't want to name, because naming it would make it real. He couldn't sleep that night. He lay in the bed they'd shared for nearly 3 decades, staring at the ceiling, his mind spiraling. Melissa came home just before 1 a.m. He heard the garage door, the car pulling in, footsteps climbing the stairs. Brandon pretended to be asleep. When she entered the bedroom, he caught a different scent on her, a subtle masculine note mixed with her usual perfume. It wasn't his cologne. It was something more expensive, more refined. Melissa didn't say a word. She went straight to the bathroom and turned on the shower. The water ran for nearly 20 minutes, as if she were washing away more than just fatigue. When she finally got into bed, she turned to the opposite side, tucked her phone under her pillow, and didn't say goodnight. Brandon kept staring at the ceiling, feeling the space between them stretch into miles. The next morning, Friday, he woke up early, before she did. An idea had taken shape during his sleepless night. He quietly went downstairs, entered the home office, turned on the computer, and brewed a strong pot of coffee. He sat in the slightly creaking leather chair and logged into their joint bank account. They'd always had financial transparency. Always paid bills together. Always trusted each other. Or at least that's what he'd believed until that moment. The past 3 months of statements told a story Brandon didn't recognize. Reservations at boutique hotels downtown in Charlotte, upscale places he'd never visited with her. The Chateau Inn, $450 a night, 5 times. The Rose Boutique Hotel, $380, 3 times. Dinners at expensive French restaurants, Le Bernardin, Amelie's, with tabs between $250 and $400, always on nights she claimed to be working. Purchases at high-end men's stores, Brooks Brothers shirts at $200 each, $150 ties. $300 Dior and Tom Ford fragrances. A $700 Fossil watch. All charged to their shared card. All within the last 90 days. Brandon felt sick. He printed the statements, page after page. Grabbed a red pen and highlighted every suspicious transaction. Organized everything chronologically, jotting notes in the margins. His logistics background had taught him to follow trails, connect dots, spot patterns. And this pattern was crystal clear. $35,000. She'd spent $35,000 in 3 months. When Melissa came down for coffee, it was already 8:30 a.m. Saturday morning. She was dressed up, flawless makeup, a blue silk blouse he didn't remember seeing, tailored pants, high heels. Far too put together for a Saturday at home. "I'm meeting a client to go over an event," she explained before he could ask. Brandon sat at the kitchen table, the statement spread out in front of him like cards from a grim game. He'd spent the last 2 hours staring at those papers, letting the truth sink in. "Good morning," Melissa said, heading toward the coffee machine. She didn't even look at him at first. Brandon didn't respond. He simply pushed the papers toward her. The sound of the pages hitting the table finally made her look. She froze, cup halfway to her lips, eyes scanning the pages. Color drained from her face instantly. Her hand trembled. "What is this?" she asked, voice shaking. Brandon leaned forward, arms crossed on the table, eyes locked on hers. "This is our joint bank account, Melissa. Our shared account, the one we've always been transparent about." He pointed to the red marks. "Can you explain these hotel bookings?" "The Chateau Inn, $450 a night, 5 times in the last 3 months. The Rose Boutique Hotel, 3 times. These dinners at Amelie's and Le Bernardin, $300, $400 tabs. These purchases at Brooks Brothers, shirts, cologne, a $700 watch. All these charges I don't recognize." Melissa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "They're work expenses, Brandon. I plan events, I need to check out venues, evaluate hotels and restaurants, entertain clients." "Entertain clients," Brandon repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "You entertain clients in boutique hotels? Book $400 a night rooms for meetings? Buy designer men's gifts for clients? Have romantic dinners with clients at 11 at night, then tell me over the phone I'm not your owner?" He stood up, chair scraping the floor. "Who is he, Melissa? Who's the man spending our money while you treat me like an inconvenience for caring?" Her voice faltered. "You're overreacting, this is ridiculous. You're being paranoid, jumping to conclusions from legitimate work expenses." But as she spoke, her hands shook, her voice cracked, her eyes couldn't hold his gaze. Brandon slammed his hand on the table, not violently, but firmly enough to rattle the mugs. "Don't treat me like an idiot, Melissa. Don't insult me by pretending I'm stupid. I've got 3 months of proof right here. 3 months of documented lies. $35,000. You spent $35,000 of our money in 3 months. So I'll ask again, and this time I want the truth, who is he?" The silence was crushing. Melissa started to cry, but not tears of regret. These were the tears of someone caught, with no way out. "It's Justin," she finally whispered. "Justin Carver." Brandon felt like he'd been punched. "Justin? Justin Carver? That client from your firm? The married real estate guy? The father of 3 kids you all treat like a premium account?" Melissa nodded, hands trembling. "It just happened, we started with work lunches, conversations. He understood me. Made me feel seen, special, not like you, always buried in your spreadsheets and job." Brandon let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "I care about you. I call at 11 at night to see if you're okay, if you're safe, if you need a ride. And you tell me I'm not your owner, that you're not my property, that I'm controlling. Fine. You were right. You're not my property." He stood, gathered the statements into a folder, and looked at her with a coldness she'd never seen. "Perfect. Then don't come back home." Melissa was stunned. "What are you saying?" "Brandon, wait, we can talk. It was a mistake. I can explain." Brandon grabbed his car keys. "I'm saying exactly what you need to hear. This marriage is over. You want freedom? You've got it. But not in my house, not with my money, not at my expense, while I play the fool. He walked to the door, paused, turned. You've got until Sunday night to get your things. After that, I'm changing the locks. And Melissa? I hope he was worth $35,000 and 28 years of marriage. He left, went upstairs, locked himself in the bedroom, and made a call to Richard Patterson, a divorce attorney a colleague had recommended months earlier. Brandon Moore. Good morning. I need to retain your services. My wife is having an affair. She's spent $35,000 of our money on her lover in the last 3 months, and I have full documentation. Are you available today? The consultation was set for 2 p.m. Melissa tried reaching him all day, knocked on the door, sent texts, called repeatedly, left tearful voicemails promising she could explain that it was weakness, that she still loved him. Brandon ignored them all. He moved on autopilot, driven by a cold clarity that came from knowing there was no turning back. At the Saturday meeting with Richard Patterson in his office, Brandon presented all the organized statements, explained the timeline, mentioned the "not your property" comment, and asked about his rights. Richard, 60, with 3 decades in family law, reviewed the documents and took notes. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, not equal, but fair. The judge divides assets fairly, not necessarily 50-50. With proof of marital funds being misused to support an extramarital relationship, you're in a strong position. We need to document everything. Brandon nodded. She used her work email to schedule meetings. I saw it when she left her session open. The attorney smiled. That's gold, Brandon. If she used company resources to facilitate a relationship with a client, that violates corporate policy, potential conflict of interest. Can you access those emails? Brandon confirmed he could, explaining they shared a home computer. Richard was direct. Do it today. Immediately. Before she realizes and deletes everything. We need those communications. They strengthen your case and could have professional consequences for her. In the days that followed, Brandon acted with surgical precision. He accessed the computer, recovered emails from the cloud backup Melissa had apparently forgotten. What he found was devastating. Explicit exchanges between her and Justin Carver, messages that started professional, quickly turned intimate, then romantic, then sexual. Detailed planning of meetups, discussions about which hotels were discreet, which restaurants had private booths, how to sync their schedules. Messages where she complained about Brandon, calling him boring, predictable, unimaginative, while Justin was exciting, adventurous. Brandon felt no pleasure reading them, only deep pain and, paradoxically, validation that his decision was right. He copied everything, organized it chronologically, compiled a full dossier, and sent it to Richard. The turning point came when Brandon, after consulting Richard, made decisions that would change everything. He wouldn't just quietly file for divorce. He'd ensure the truth came out in a way that had real, tangible consequences. With his attorney's legal approval, Brandon prepared 2 packages. The first was sent anonymously to Catherine Carver, Justin's wife. No note, no explanation, just evidence, highlighted bank statements, screenshots of messages between Justin and Melissa, photos referenced in emails. He wrote nothing. He didn't need to. The proof spoke for itself. 2 days later, Justin called Melissa in a panic, screaming. His wife had discovered everything. Confronted him with undeniable proof. Kicked him out in front of their 3 kids. Called a lawyer and filed for divorce. Justin blamed Melissa for everything, called her careless, irresponsible, said she'd ruined his life, destroyed his family, tarnished his reputation. Said he never wanted to see her again, that she'd been the biggest mistake of his life. Melissa, shattered, desperately tried calling Brandon, begging for forgiveness. He didn't answer a single call. blocked her number. Instructed his daughters, whom he'd already told the painful truth, to not act as intermediaries. The second part of the plan was even more devastating. With legal guidance on how to do it untraceably, Brandon prepared and sent a detailed anonymous complaint to the compliance and HR department at Melissa's company. The firm, a reputable marketing agency, had strict policies against employee-client relationships, especially those involving conflicts of interest, misuse of company resources, or anything compromising professional integrity. The complaint included specific dates, copies of corporate emails Melissa had used to coordinate personal meetups with Justin, and details about her relationship with a premium client. HR, legally obligated to investigate, launched a full internal inquiry. 3 days later, Melissa was summoned to a formal meeting. She was directly questioned and confronted with policies she'd signed upon hiring. When she tried to deny it, they showed her the corporate emails she'd used to schedule romantic encounters with Justin, discussions about hotels and restaurants clearly unrelated to business, messages sent during work hours using company resources. The policy was clear, the violation undeniable. The company couldn't retain an employee who'd so blatantly compromised professional integrity. Melissa was fired for cause in less than a week, no notice, no severance, no letter of recommendation. Just a permanent mark on her record. News spread quickly through Charlotte's relatively small corporate events and marketing circles. In an industry where reputation is everything, the scandal was devastating. Justin not only lost his 22-year marriage but began losing contracts as other business owners, many friends of Catherine, learned the details. Some clients distanced themselves over values alignment. His partner in the real estate development firm questioned whether they wanted to remain associated. Reputation, Brandon learned, took years to build and minutes to destroy with one wrong choice. The divorce process was surprisingly swift and brutal. Richard built an essentially uncontestable case. With all evidence meticulously organized, documentation of every dollar spent, message copies showing premeditation and systematic deception, proof of marital funds used for infidelity, the judge was unequivocal. Melissa had flagrantly and repeatedly violated marital trust and used shared resources to fund an extramarital affair for months. Asset division heavily favored Brandon. He kept the $450,000 house, the bulk of their joint savings, around $300,000, and his retirement fund intact. He wasn't required to pay Melissa a cent in spousal support. Melissa tried arguing through her hastily hired, less experienced attorney that she deserved an equal split for contributing nearly 3 decades, sacrificing career opportunities, and having a right to equitable division. But Richard was relentless. Your Honor, Ms. Melissa Moore spent approximately $35,000 over 3 months to maintain an extramarital affair, using a joint card without Mr. Brandon Moore's knowledge or consent. This isn't equitable division of assets, it's misappropriation. It's bad faith. It's a breach of the fiduciary trust that underpins any marriage. North Carolina explicitly allows courts to consider financial misconduct, and this is a textbook case. The judge, with 30 years in family law, fully agreed. The ruling was final. 6 months after that Friday morning confrontation, Brandon was living a completely different life, one so transformed he sometimes didn't recognize the man he'd become. He sold the big house full of memories he didn't want to revisit. Used the proceeds to buy a modern apartment in a new downtown Charlotte building, 15th floor, with balconies overlooking Lake Norman. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, one for him, one for his daughter's visits, minimalist, contemporary decor, no traces of the past. He started traveling, something he'd postponed for decades due to work and family responsibilities. He drove Highway 1 along California's coast, visited Yosemite, Zion, the Grand Canyon. Spent a week in Seattle with Rachel, getting to know her life, her apartment, her friends, reconnecting in ways they hadn't since she was a teenager. He realized, with almost spiritual clarity, that at 52, his life wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning a new chapter, a reinvention he never knew was possible. Melissa faced a very different reality. Unemployed, homeless, with a tarnished reputation in Charlotte's event scene, and minimal savings after the unfavorable asset split, she moved into a small, cheap one-bedroom apartment on the city's east side, a neighborhood she'd never have considered before. Justin vanished completely and permanently from her life once his divorce was finalized and he'd lost half his assets to Catherine. He blocked Melissa's number, blocked her on social media, instructed his lawyers to reject any contact, refused all communication outright. She tried finding work in her field, sent dozens of resumes, went on interviews, but whenever companies ran reference and background checks, the story of her termination for policy violations surfaced. No reputable firm wanted to take that risk. Their daughters, Rachel and Sophie, after Brandon told them everything honestly, even showing them the statements and explaining how their mother had destroyed the marriage, were deeply disappointed. They didn't cut contact entirely, she was still their mother, but the relationship grew cold, formal, distant, filled with uncomfortable silences. Weekly calls became monthly, then sporadic. Visits all but stopped. Melissa eventually landed some freelance marketing consulting work, operating alone from her tiny apartment, earning a fraction of her former income, with no benefits, no stability, no comfortable life she'd once taken for granted. One autumn afternoon, nearly a year later, Brandon was at his favorite cafe near the lake, sipping a latte and reading a book on Stoic philosophy, when he saw Melissa walk in. It was accidental. She looked older, hair unkempt, clothes simple, the sparkle gone from her eyes. She saw him too, hesitated, then gathered her courage and approached. "Brandon," she said, voice small and hesitant. "Can I talk to you? Just for a minute." Brandon studied her for a long moment, considering. Part of him wanted to say no, stand up and leave, maintain the clean distance he'd established. But another part, maybe curiosity, maybe some remnant of who they'd been decades ago, silently gestured to the empty chair. Melissa sat, placed her purse on her lap, fidgeted nervously with the strap. "I ruined everything, didn't I? I threw away 28 years, a family, an entire life, for an illusion that lasted a few months. For nothing." Brandon took a deliberate, slow sip of his latte and looked out the window at the calm lake, where a few boats drifted lazily under the afternoon sun. "You threw it away because you consciously chose illusion over reality. Because when I tried to be present, when I called worried, when I cared, you told me you weren't my property. And you were right, Melissa. You weren't. You never were. But marriage isn't about ownership. Marriage is about deliberate choice, voluntary commitment, mutual respect. And you chose differently. You chose wrong." Melissa began crying silently, tears streaming down her bare face, but Brandon felt none of the compassion he might have a year earlier. He felt only a kind of resigned peace, the acceptance that the past was past and couldn't be changed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'm sorry for everything. For every lie, every dollar spent, every time I treated you poorly. If only I could go back." Brandon gently but firmly interrupted. "I believe you're sorry. But being sorry doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't give back lost time. It doesn't erase lies. It doesn't rebuild destroyed trust. It doesn't reverse the choices you made, repeatedly, consciously, over months. You wanted freedom, and now you have it. All the freedom in the world. And so do I." He stood calmly, left a $20 bill on the table for the coffee, picked up his book. He looked at her one last time, not with hate, not with love, just distant neutrality. "Take care of yourself, Melissa. Truly. I hope you find peace someday." He walked out of the cafe without looking back, got into his new sedan, bought with part of the house sale proceeds, and drove back to his apartment. That night, he had dinner plans with a group of friends he'd met through a hiking club that gathered every Saturday for trail walks. Interesting people, with their own lives and stories, who saw him simply as Brandon, not as the betrayed husband, not as a scandal victim, just as himself. Life went on, as it always does, and Brandon finally understood deeply what it meant to truly live, free from the weight of a past built on lies, free from a marriage that had become a farce. He was free in a way that had nothing to do with marital status and everything to do with inner peace. Melissa stayed in the cafe, alone at the table where Brandon had left her, staring at the empty cup he'd drunk from, realizing too late, with brutal, painful clarity, that freedom without loyalty wasn't really freedom. It was just loneliness wearing another name. She'd deliberately traded a man who genuinely loved her, who'd built an entire life beside her, who'd been there for every important moment, for someone who vanished instantly at the first sign of trouble, the moment the relationship stopped being convenient and exciting. She'd dismissed the worried call of a devoted husband and now had absolutely no one to call, no one who cared where she was or if she was okay. The irony was cruel, but perfectly just. Brandon had rebuilt his dignity and his life from the ruins of their destroyed marriage, brick by brick, choice by choice. Melissa learned the hard way that some words, once spoken, can't be taken back. Some choices, once made, can't be undone. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. The lesson wasn't written in eloquent speeches or dramatic declarations, it was etched into the concrete lives each of them now lived after that Friday morning. He was genuinely free and renewed, rebuilt, at peace with himself. She was technically free but emotionally and socially hollow, living with the direct consequences of her own decisions. And perhaps that was the greatest revenge of all, the deepest, most lasting kind, simply living well, living fully, living authentically, while the one who betrayed you, lied to you, and dismissed you faces alone the inevitable and proportional consequences of their own actions. Justice, Brandon learned, didn't always come in dramatic form. Sometimes it came simply as living your best life while watching from a distance, with genuine indifference, the one who chose to leave you behind sink under the weight of their own choices. That was the most powerful form of healing possible. It wasn't about destroying the person who hurt you. It was about rebuilding yourself and becoming someone even better. It was about turning pain into wisdom, betrayal into freedom, an ending into a new beginning. Brandon had finally understood that the best chapter of his life wasn't behind him, trapped in a marriage built on lies. It lay ahead, waiting to be written with honesty, authenticity, and true peace. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.